Hello everyone. So welcome to the second part of our long series of a discussion on OCD. And last time, you know where we left it. We left it to the fact that we had come to understanding that the repetitious things that we were doing, or superstition things that we were doing, such as touching a rock, leaving the home, or turning the lights up and down 3-4 times or 10 times, or cleaning where we want to sit, or using alcohol, or washing our hands 5 million times. These we had convinced ourselves that they are necessary to do to protect us from something bad happen to us or to our loved ones, and or if we are concerned about germs, and this will take care of it. And we were doing all sorts of things, thinking that that would work, and it turned out to be enforcing the idea that it's working. Why? Because while we were doing these crazy things, nothing actually would happen that we were afraid of it happening. And that kind of supported and reinforced the fact that, oh, what we're doing is actually working, and it's the right thing to do, regardless of which conjured up in our head, but it's the right thing to do. So, and we wanted to examine in this video, well, what else is happening that while we were doing these things, that when someone suggests that, why don't you just stop doing it, see if anything bad happens? And we while it's logical, we are reluctant to do it. Why is it that we continue doing what we used to do? The washing hands, the cleaning this, the cleaning the seat, leaving the house, touching a rock, turning lights up and down 5 million times, or walking on different, blocks of tiles on the pavements, maybe 3-4 times back and forth. All these little things that we have certain glitches, different people differently, or something that we would maybe end up saying it 5 times instead of once, or certain kind of noises that we would make, and we think we gotta do that because that will do something which would help something that we are afraid to happen would not happen, or bring that psychological security. So why is it that we continue doing all these things, even when some logical suggestion is suggested to us that, why don't you just don't do the 3 or 4 or 5 times turning up and down, on and off switch, and do it once and see what happens. If something bad happened, then maybe it has something to do, maybe you have a reason to do what you're doing. But why don't you try it? But even though it's logical, we don't do it. Why? Well, remember how they always told us practice makes perfect? And they had a pretty good scientific reason for that, but we didn't know. We just thought, oh, it means just practicing, you'll be good at something. But why would we be good at something if we practice? Well, because we have something called neurons in our heads, in our brains. Since I'm not a doctor, I talk in layman terms, but I hope that it will make sense to you as well. When you want to play piano, and the more you practice, the better you get. When you play tennis, the more you practice, the better you get. Precision, where to put, what not to put, the strategy, and so on. And the piano, the practicing of it, in becoming really proficient in it, and by doing more of it, you become better at it. And that's simply because when you do something over and over, more of it, practicing the piano, synaptic neurons create a bridge between them. Because from one neuron to the other neuron, neurotransmitters should travel, and to bring that information, transmit that information that is necessary for you to become good at something to the next neuron. teaching it how to work and passing along the information and fortifying the connection that these information would pass by will happen by you keep doing what it is that you want to learn and be good at. Like the piano. The more piano you play and practice, the more bridges are built between the two ends of the neurons that would help you to become better at what it is you're doing. And these neurons, when they're all connected, more and more often will be connected in a certain sequence, in a certain way, with those bridges helping you to become really good at piano playing. And so it becomes automatic playing piano. You don't think about it anymore. It's just there because the imprint, the program, has taken place by these bridges being created between the neurons, which is the way for us to become good at something. Same thing with tennis. If you don't play tennis for a while, if you don't play piano for a while, you're not as good as you used to be because it needs practicing for these bridges to continuously be built and be fortified, reinforced, and maintained. So the more you do it, the better you become, and the harder it becomes to not be as good as you used to be when you were doing it a lot. That's why a person who's really very good in piano playing and has been playing it for years have created lots of bridges between the synaptic neurons, and therefore it takes longer for him to forget playing piano, even if he doesn't play for a while. But it will happen. When he doesn't play for a while, he will not be as good as he used to be when he was practicing piano a lot. Why? Because just as when you practice a lot something, synaptic neurons create bridges between the two and they become stronger in what you're doing. When you don't play it, when you don't practice something, these bridges between synaptic neurons will be marked by a protein called CQ1, and glial cells, which understand which ones have to be marked. When you sleep, brain shrinks, allows the microglial cells go and find those marked bridges and destroy them. So make it available for you to have more synaptic neurons to become tailor-made for new things that you want to learn, because you can't be using the ones that already have created the bridges for becoming good at something, and you don't have enough of them to constantly use new ones. You have to unlearn something in order to learn a new thing. So when you don't play piano for a long time, eventually these bridges between synaptic neurons are going to be marked and they're going to be destroyed, because the brain realizes that these are dormant, they're not being used, and you need these connections to learn other things. In order to learn other things, you gotta create place, create possibilities. Those possibilities are by destroying these bridges that are not being used for what once they were used. So, same thing when you do these OCD stuff. While you've been turning the light switch up and down 5 million times and touching the rock and washing your hands 50 times and cleaning this and cleaning that and thinking this will contaminate that, I have to clean this with alcohol and then put that over there and clean that and then do this, all these that you've been doing constantly, guess what? To become really good at it and make it to be a default in your life, so you will be doing it as a routine every day. What have you been doing? Not just that combating a fear of something bad happening by these sort of things that you have created with this germ or something bad happening to a loved one or to yourself or your business. You've also been reinforcing these behaviors to become better at it by creating bridges between synaptic neurons and making it to become a conditioning. Just like as good a piano player you became by keep playing it and creating these bridges between synaptic neurons and turning it into a conditioned behavior without thinking. You will sit behind the piano and you play the music without even thinking about it, because those synaptic neurons had turned you into an automatic reactionary. Once you see a piano, you know how to play. And you've been doing the same thing to yourself, to your psyche, by constantly doing these weird things that some of us have done or some are still doing in different levels. And you've created a conditioning, automatic conditioning in you, that now that you're even being suggested, why do you just not do it for a day and see anything bad happens to you? You can't do it. Or you're reluctant to do it. Why? Not because the suggestion is not sound, it's logical. Let me just not do it for a day, see if anything bad happens. If it did happen, then I can attribute it, oh, but then I should do it, so nothing bad happens. But if nothing bad happened, then I would say, well, I'm actually doing it for no reason then. Why don't I reduce it and help myself to be cured, logically? But you still want to do it. Why? Because you have created the conditioning. You have created all those bridges between synaptic neurons by keep doing this the same way, and you've become really good at it, like you've become good at playing tennis, or you've become good at playing piano. So what we need to do right now is to reverse it by somehow starting to play less piano. To do this sort of thing less. Because once you start playing less piano, and less piano, and less piano, you would be reconditioning yourself to play less piano. You will be reconditioning yourself to do less of the switch on and off, less of the washing hands, less of the cleaning this, cleaning that. This is contaminated, my shoes touched that, and I should not touch it now. I picked my shoes up here, now my hand touched it, and I can't touch my clothes, and I've sat outside, I gotta change my clothes. All of that will be less conditioning. And when you don't do that for a while, the microglial cells are going to destroy the bridges between the synaptic neurons that by repetitions have been created for you to keep doing this. They will then stop making you think that you need to do anything as many times as you used to. And eventually you become bad and bad in doing something that you were so good at it. Like the piano. If you don't play it for a while, you won't be as good as you once were, because these bridges would be destroyed and the synaptic neurons don't have connections to send these information and make you feel like you know what to do. So you gotta reprogram yourself. So even though the suggestion of not doing it for a while is logic and sound suggestion, but you still can't not do it because you're conditioned to be really good at these things, all these cleanings and all these touching and this and that, so forth. So it's all about conditioning. Now, what else happens in our mind that makes it difficult for us to wean ourselves away from this whole thing that we worked ourselves into? What else is there is that we have turned this habit through our fears, that we tried to combat the fears by becoming superstitions. Then we created certain rituals in order to create that hope and create that counter that fear. Then we end up having conditioned ourselves to default doing these things by default, not even thinking about it, and become really good at it, like the piano player. But we evolved from all that into belief. Now we believe that what we do is necessary because we have done so many things that had nothing to do with anything bad happened to us. So naturally, nothing bad happened to us, and we attributed it to what crazy things that we do. And because we've kept doing it, nothing bad happened, and we concluded that this is our life is good because of all these superstitious things that we do. Therefore, we now believe that it is necessary. It has become a belief, like we believe in a deity, like the Egyptians believed in that statue that they built it in their own basement out of rock and mud and clay, and they brought it out and smoothed it and made it look colorful or this and that, and they worshipped it, made it their own deity. It was made by their own hands, but their mind suggested that this has a special powers, and their mind believed that suggestion, having done this so many times, bowing and praying to that statue, and the harvest happened to be good, so they attributed to that. They conditioned themselves that this is right and it's got powers that I myself suggested to it, gave it to it in my own thoughts, but now I believe it. It's now a belief. Now I actually think this wasn't my own brainchild. It has magical powers. Not because I gave it, because it does. Why? Because I have belief in it. It is now my belief. And for belief, I don't question it anymore. I don't need proof. Who has asked for proof for any God that was being used and believed in 1,000 years ago? No one. Even today, if you believe in something, have you ever asked the question about the God that you believe in? No. Because there's no need for it. Because you've decided, I believe in it. I'm not discussing deities or religions and all that here at all. I'm just trying to deliver some point for you to recognize that the suggestion that you make in your mind, after a while continuously doing it, you end up having reasons to make it a belief. Once it becomes a belief, you no longer need proof or any kind of an evidence for it to be as effective as you think it is by having all these washing and doing these things like that. So the point is focusing on the belief, that when you believe it and make it a belief, it becomes like a religion. It becomes like in that you will be afraid or unlikely to feel that it's okay not to do it, because it is part of your life. You have made it part of your being, part of the reason that you're happy. And when that takes place, you no longer are in control of your logic. You're actually following your belief. And for belief, you don't need any proof. And when you don't need any proof, as long as it gives you certain kind of a hope, psychological security, combating the fears that you have for something, you will do it. And the old ways, the old people, thousands of years ago, they would even do sacrifices because they believed that if they do that, it will help the other child to be cured from some kind of a disease, or the harvest would be good. They were doing it with no evidence, but it had become their belief because they had done that. They have, sacrificed to poor somebody, and the harvest wasn't bad that year. So they said, hey, there it is. We got to sacrifice someone to have a harvest. And when that becomes a belief, then nobody asks for proof anymore. And you are doing the same thing. So it has become a belief. And when it becomes a belief, now you see how this superstitious fear of something bad to happen had turned into OCD and is now developed into a belief that no longer you're questioning it. Even if you were hesitant at the beginning, no longer. Now you have justification for doing what you're doing. Before, you were hoping that it will just remedy some fear and alleviate some stressful thinking or worries. But now you're convinced. Why? Not because any evidence that it does, but because you've been doing it repetitiously, you've conditioned yourself, and the conditioning moved up to become a belief. That's where the trouble starts. It becomes more and more difficult for you to stop playing the piano. So the bridges between the synaptic neurons will have a chance to be destroyed. Now you don't even want to stop playing piano. You're not going to give yourself a chance to stop cleaning and not doing these crazy things, because you have now turned it into a belief. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is, now that it is a belief, and just like the old Egyptians, that they make a statue and worship it and ask for cure and help and food and power from it, from the very thing that they themselves created, and they didn't have that magical powers themselves, but they think what they have created out of clay has that magical powers that they're seeking, because they just believed that it should have. And the same way, you've ended up believing that all these things that is called OCD actually has an effect, has a positive effect in something, which is just a belief, nothing more. And you're not asking for a question, just as nobody in the old Egyptian times asked any questions from the validity of the power of that statue that they themselves had put together and decorated it. So, what are other things that we can logically think about to help us to start diminishing these washing hands, these light switch up and down, these back and forth on a certain brick on the street, these cleaning and sitting here, that touch contaminate that one, and takes us so long of rituals just to leave home or come back in? What else is there that we can logically discuss? On the next part, we will talk about what else is there that could logically help us to realize that we really can reverse this by just understanding the role of our psyche into it as we're discussing it, and what other steps we can take logically to see the light. So, we'll talk later in the next video of OCD. Don't forget, if you like what you're hearing, click on subscribe and like the video. That will help us to be more known on YouTube, so more people can benefit from the stuff that we ponder and talk about. Talk to you soon.